Hey guys, welcome back to the Cash Flow Podcast, where we teach finance as simple as possible. My name is Clint Hansen. I'm studying to be a CPA, and every episode I try to break down finance as quickly and as simply as possible. Today I want to talk about good debt and bad debt. And I kind of want to do this in a different format from here on out. I'm just going to kind of make these shorter in general and really just focus on one topic, one question, and really nail that down. So these episodes won't be quite as long. Hopefully they'll be just as informative, and I'll try to focus on one question, like I said. So, yeah. Last week we talked about stock market terms, and, well, last time we talked about stock market terms with McKay. That was a great episode. You guys really liked that. So hopefully we'll have McKay back on sometime soon. Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic of good debt versus bad debt is because I had an interesting experience the other day. So I was driving along with my friend, and he brought up the question, well, actually, I don't remember who brought it up, but someone brought up the question, how do you define wealth? At what point can you say, I am rich? Monetarily, you can have this deep philosophical discussion about what wealth is and your outlook on life, which those things are important. But monetarily, in terms of dollars, how would you define rich, being rich? And he said that he defines being rich as having no debt, as having a house and it's paid off, and no car debt, no student debt, whatever it is you just have no debt. So yeah, kind of interesting. And the way I would describe being rich is different, and maybe I'll dive into that in a different episode. But there are a couple of reasons why I don't agree with this definition of being rich. Okay, some of the wealthiest people have debt. They use it strategically in order to have things and keep their wealth. And so there's such thing as good debt. There's such thing as having debt that is good. Now, of course, this isn't a bad situation to be in, to have a house and have all your debt paid off of all of your mortgages and your car payments and everything. That's not bad. It brings stability. But there are some cases where debt is good. Okay? So in order for me to define what makes debt good versus bad, I want to kind of define debt, okay? So debt is when you borrow money. In this case, you could borrow other things, I guess. But in this case, we're talking about money. Debt is when you borrow money in order to buy something that you currently cannot or don't want to with your current money. So you usually take this out from a bank, but you could take it out from your friend or your parents or your grandparents, even if you wanted to. And now, if you took out debt, let's say you took out a loan for $1,000, okay? There's usually going to be a price attached to that. So if there's, and that's called interest, okay? Now, if you took out debt that has no interest, that's a very good situation, because interest is usually what's known as the price of debt. Okay, so if I have a loan for $1,000 and the interest rate is 5%, I'm paying 5% on that loan that I have out every single month, or whatever the terms of the loan is, and that's the price that I'm paying is 5% on the outstanding balance. So there's good debt and bad debt. Generally, good debt has low interest rate. There's kind of has a low interest rate. There's kind of two things that define good debt: is what you're using the debt for, number one, and number two, how much the interest is. Okay, so if you could take out a loan with zero interest, that's a very good deal, right? Let's say I could take out a loan for $1,000 and pay back exactly $1,000. Now, if I didn't do anything with it, there's no harm, no foul, but no gain either, right? And I just get the $1,000 and put it in the bank, and then when the time's up, I just give it right back to him, right? There's nothing that goes on there, okay? So why do people take out debt? Well, why do you take on debt? If you do have debt, is to be able to have something now that you would regularly have to wait to have later, in hopes that you get a greater value than what your interest is worth. So it doesn't have to be monetary. Okay, so let's say that I take out a house mortgage. By the way, mortgage is just a fancy word for debt on your house. So let's say I take out mortgage on a mortgage to buy a house. Okay, so if I do that and my interest rate is 5%, I'm paying that amount for my loan, and in exchange I get a place to live in. Right, I get this nice house to live in, and instead of having to present a ton of money right up front, then I can pay it all off in monthly segments and be able to have a nice place to live in and to raise a family in. Okay, so the strategic priority number one of debt is to be able to have something now that ordinarily you would have to wait to have in the future, and sometimes in the very far future, or maybe not, even not at all, in the case of like a house or something like that. Okay, so if you're able to have more value to you by having that thing right then than what it costs or the interest rate, then it's worth it to get it. Okay, so some people can trade on margin, is what that's called, is when they borrow money in hopes that they earn a greater percentage back than what their interest rate is worth. So let's say I want to I take out a loan for $1,000 and it's a 5% interest rate. I'm hoping that I can earn more than 5% over the course of however long my loan is, so that I can earn money on that loan. Now, in the case of a house, it's not monetary. It's not a dollar value that you're trying to beat. You're just getting value from the house. Or like your education is another great investment, and transportation or business, whatever it is, right? So in other words, you're just trying to look at what your return on investment is versus what the loan is costing you. Okay, I know this is kind of confusing, but I'm just going to go through some quick examples real quick. So first example that I thought of good good debt is housing. Okay, and I've already used that example. So you can take out a loan for a house and you have a place to live. Another good example is education. Then there's also transportation and business. So business ventures, if you get a business opportunity. So those are the 4 areas of debt that I would recommend: is housing, education, transportation, and business ventures. If you can afford to do any of those things without taking on debt, and it's still worth it to you, then that's great. You don't have to take on debt. For example, I don't take out any loans for my student I don't take out any student loans. Sorry, that was weirdly phrased. And I don't take out loans for buying or leasing. I don't lease a car either. And we'll dive into that, whether you should buy, lease a car, maybe in another episode. But that's just something that I would rather do, since I'm still a poor college student. I would rather not have a car payment. I'd rather just buy a cheap car that gets me places. And I don't really care if people judge me for not having a great car, because everyone knows I'm in college. So that's kind of how I would do it. But if you're in a situation where you need a car, it's not bad to take on debt. And remember, there's no such thing. Well, there is such thing. Remember, there's good debt and bad debt. Okay, and remember the characteristics of both. Okay, so let's go into some examples of bad debt. Number 1 is credit card debt. Credit card debt is very, very bad debt for 2 reasons. Remember, those 2 reasons that make something good or bad is the interest rate or what you're using it for. Okay, so what you're using it for is probably not ideal. You don't use a credit card to finance something that's probably going to give you more value in the future, like housing or your education. Hopefully you're not putting those things, hopefully you're not putting those things on a credit card because of rule number 2, which is that it is very high interest debt. Okay, so this is not to say credit cards are bad. Like, I'm not being Dave Ramsey is very opposed to credit cards, but credit cards aren't bad because, and that's a subject for a whole nother episode, but the reason that they can be bad is if you spend too much that you're not able to pay back at the end of the month, then that becomes a loan. And when you can't pay that loan, it charges insane amounts of interest. It charges like 18 to 20 to 30% interest, whereas like a housing loan, a mortgage is 5 to 10%. It's a lot lower percentage these days. Your parents are probably paying like 2% because they got lucky when they bought their house, but these days it's a little bit higher. Okay, another example of bad debt is buy now, pay later loans, vacation loans, payday loans. Really, any kind of debt outside of those 4 things that I mentioned is not great debt, because they're, one, used for things that aren't going to bring you more value than they're worth, than they cost, their interest rate. And number 2 is they have a very high interest rate that will be crippling if you let it compound. Okay? So, don't get into bad debt. It's okay to be in good debt, okay? And going back to my first example, wealth isn't just defined by your debt, okay? A lot of wealthy people take on debt because they're able to get a higher return for what they use that debt for than how much the debt is costing them, okay? So that's all to say, make sure you're covering your expenses, including your interest and your mortgage and payments and your transportation, whatever it is, every single month, and try to have some money left over, as I've preached in the past episodes. Okay? So thanks for listening to this week's or today's episode. Remember to look in the links for the spreadsheet that I would highly recommend that you get to track your income and expenses that I came up with. It's pretty cheap. You can get it on Etsy, and the link's in the description. And then make sure to email me any questions that you might have, and I would love to answer them. Thanks.